Record. Welcome to the Thrive All project, a permaculture design undertaking as part of the Ecoversity Permaculture Design Certification Program. We're from the 2022-23 cohort under the direction of teachers Stephen Brooks and Penny Livingston. Thrive All is a real-world project, a self-sufficient community that will eventually support up to 150 dwellings in a forested wilderness area in Northern Ontario. The project's design team includes me, Guy Crittenden of Parry Sound. We can move forward to that slide. And I focused on dwellings and buildings for the community. We have Angela Pontarolo of San Francisco, California, who figured out the community's energy needs. We have Joey Petit of the Finger Lakes District region in New York State, who investigated water solutions, and Justin Pitters of Brantford, Ontario, Canada, who came up with innovative waste solutions for the community, and Alex Popp, who calculated the best ways to produce food for a growing community. Thrive All is the brainchild of founder Didi Vergados, an entrepreneur with rights to a vertical farm technology that will be deployed at the site. Didi is promoting the African Ubuntu sharing model for the internal economics and values of the community, which has the advantage, by the way, that it's located in what's called unorganized township, which is a unique municipal designation in the province of Ontario that allows for greater design and building freedom. Now we're going to take a look at where Thrive All is situated, which is in an area of rugged natural beauty celebrated by Canadian artists. In the next slide, we see the landscape of forests and dark lakes was once the epicenter of the Courrier du Bois network and the fur trade that supplied beaver pelts to Europe. What we might mistake as Thrive All's pristine forest is actually the altered remnant of a logging industry that converted stands of enormous trees in the 19th century into a literal moonscape that has since been replanted. Let's take a look at that moonscape. How about that? That's what this area looked like 150 years ago. Hence, we have Thrive All's near monoculture of maple trees in the northern half of the 200-acre lot, and in the next slide, the mixture of coniferous and deciduous trees in the southern area south of the creek. The Thrive All design team plans to modify this disrupted landscape with regenerative silviculture. In the next slide, we celebrate the fact that our design team is envisioning a new tradition, replacing the history of colonization and exploitation with a different culture, as though the treaties had been honored with the area's first people and life here had always been practiced sustainably. In the next slide, we see that the 200-acre land parcel is about an hour south of the city of North Bay and an hour northeast of the lakeside town of Parry Sound on Georgian Bay. Loring and Port Loring are only about 5 to 10 minutes east of the settlement. In the next slides, we see that the parcel leads north from Highway 522, and the terrain is uneven with large swales and a creek bisecting the property east to west. In the next slide, we're going to see that there's a rough road or trail with offshoots that winds its way from south to north through the community. And at the southern edge, near the highway, we have a farmhouse, a large shed, a barn near the highway, all connected to the electrical grid. These are existing buildings at the site. As mentioned, the forest north of the creek is mostly maple, and the forest to the south is a mixture of coniferous and deciduous trees. And the next slide, it's just worth noting that one of the challenges the design team had to face is that we're on an area of Precambrian shield, which is mostly limestone and granite. So we don't have deep soil here, and part of our plans include regenerating soil and creating new soil to create better growing possibilities. Now I'm going to turn it over to Alex, who's going to talk about the community layout.
Here we will cover the land sector and climate analysis. As Guy mentioned, a Thrive community will be a 200-acre lot or approximately 81 hectares in Ontario, Canada. As you mentioned, the soil will be sand, clay, and silt on top of that Precambrian shield, and we will be incorporating strategies, whether it's earthworks or soil rebuilding, to continually building that soil up. You'll see the averages for our climate, our temperature, our precipitation, as well as our sun and wind directions. Some of the resources on hand will be a lot of wood, water, and the ability to hunt, fish, and forage for food. Limitations will be the harsh winters and the heating required to sustain those winters. The shorter growing season and the Precambrian shield will limit the ability we can dig deep into the earth as well. We will have 3 phases of development. Phase 1 will be about self-sufficiency. As you can see in the map on the right, the red sections is where the southern dwellings will be built as part of phase 1. We will also build the community center and sawmill, the key infrastructure, and the food systems. In phase 2, we will look to expand and optimize. We will build the northern dwellings that you see in the yellow that are north of the creek, additional community structures as well. In phase 3, we will take a page out of Paul Wheaton's Permies book, and we will have a work to inherent land operation. The northern purple area that you see on the map is originally our zone 5, but as individuals would like to build off-grid homesteads in order for their labor, they will be able to do that. Another thing to note on this map is the brown zone 4 is our wilderness corridor. That is along the creek. It is also the lowest point of our land. And for those reasons, we designated a wildlife corridor. Here you'll see an overlay map of our structures. It is split into 2 images, the northern part of the lot and the southern part of the lot. With the key, you can see all the different aspects of the lot, of the overlay. And when you look in the bottom left corner and you see the example of 9 half-acre lots, you will see how, while it might, when you look at this map, it might look like we're taking up a lot of the land with our dwellings. In reality, as Guy said, we're actually regenerating this land. And that lot that shows what 9 half-acre lots could look like shows that in each one of those lots, we will be they will have ecosystem services. So each lot, the owner of that lot will have to, whether it's a food forest or a duck pond or a beehive or a native food forest, they will be required to use their land for the community in some way in a regenerative fashion. And all of the gray water from the dwellings will also be used to feed the plant guilds on this land. And on this image, you can see an example of what a beautiful half-acre lot could look like. Next, I will pass it back over to Guy to speak about dwellings.
Thanks, Alex. So I'm going to move through these pretty quickly because there's a lot of options that people have. We determined that the most popular, because of the abundance of wood on the property and forests that extend all around this area, we figure a lot of people will build wood cabins. In the next slide, I show a picture of another option, which is prefab homes like the Nomad up in the upper left, which will be popular with some people and can be doubled up for extra space. We could have hillside cabins and we can have walkways to deal with uneven terrain. In the next slide, we take a quick look at yurts, which we think are going to be very popular. And then moving on, we're going to have cob and adobe homes in some places, although there will be the challenge of the nature of the native soil in the area. Some of this might have to be brought in, and some young workers might even want to build tree houses or other things to live in while they establish themselves and build up enough credits to own a lot of land. We'll have tiny home clusters. In the next slide, we show earth bags. We imagine aircrete dome homes and earth ships will be suitable in some places. The next slide shows the use of a new technology that uses ceramic domes from a company called GeoShip. And then we also, in the next slide, we show ICF block construction, which is an interesting option, especially because Dee Dee's partner lives in the lot next door and he plans to establish an ICF manufacturing plant. Now let's take a look at some of the communal buildings. We envision a boathouse up on the Beaver Pond with a paddling academy. We imagine a TP-inspired spa and sauna. In the next slide, we see the sugar shack, which is a kind of tea house. Oh, sorry. I forgot I inserted this slide of the sawmill and game processing station. But if we go forward to the next slide, we'll see the tea house. This is a place for people to hang out when they've gone for a long walk in the northern part of the property. The structure of which we're the most proud is the up to 7,000-foot community center and dining hall, which we call the wigwam because it's inspired by the First Nations design. And in the next slide, you'll see that we imagine fabricating round ends to add to the central structure to create that wigwam shape. And then just to round out the discussion about homes and dwellings, if you want, you could pause the presentation at this point to look at these numbers. But we've did a survey of a range of prices for all of these structures, and the low end costs reflect the owner or the community building the dwelling themselves and using native local materials. And then we have the high end for people who can afford to just contract these things out. So that's it for dwellings.
And onto food. Thrive All community will be self-sufficient, diversified, and resilient when it comes to our food production. We'll have six primary methods of production: our outdoor food forests, our indoor operation, which will be mostly hydroponics, as well as some sawdust cultivation of mushrooms using the sawdust from our sawmill. We will have dairy from goats and eggs from chicken and quails. As domestic animals, we will have a row crop operation. We will have annual gardens outside, and we will also be hunting, foraging, and fishing in the wild. For the indoor hydroponic vertical farm, we will be going with freight farms. This is a very space-efficient growing method inside of a shipping container. We were looking at starting with 6 of these. It will cost around 1.2 million Canadian dollars. We realize that this is a high upfront cost, but we want this model because we want to ensure food production during the winter, and we're going with a space-efficient and what we believe is a reliable model. That being said, there is the opportunity to optimize this and build our own hydroponic system, which would significantly cut down the cost. We will have a 6-acre operation that will be for our regenerative solar pasture farm. 4 of those acres will be rotated between 1 acre each of wheat, oats, corn, and a nitrogen-fixing legume mix. We will be integrating goats and chickens into this landscape as part of the regenerative energy cycling. 1 acre will be a solar farm with a mixed species pasture underneath, and the other acre will serve as structures. Our goats will eat approximately 2/3 of their diet in hay from this operation, and then the other third of their diet they will eat in the warm summer months, where they will graze the land, as well as clear out parts of the forested community that we want cleared out. Here are the animals that we've incorporated into our system. As we mentioned, domestically, we'll have goats, chickens, and quails. You can see the breed on there as well. And these are some of the wild game and bugs we incorporated into our system as well. And for bugs, our main mitigation plans will be plants, chickens, and quails in order to help with pest control. We'll be growing our own medicine because what's good for Earth is good for us. So our outdoor pollinator garden will not only feed the insects and the bees and the butterflies and the wildlife, but it will be our medicine as well. And we will also cultivate medicine indoor with sawdust, outdoor with mushrooms, logs, and our hydroponic system. Here's just a quick example of what a fruit guild and food forest might look like. We will have both community food forests as well as I mentioned backyard food forests in the half-acre or quarter-acre lots. And here's a quick list of the full plant and animal lists that we incorporated into our design. Next, I'll pass it over to Joey to talk about our water.
You have to unmute, Joey. No worries, I can edit that out.
With the principles of permaculture in mind, we surveyed the property and we discovered 5 sources of water, which include an existing well, Sturtles Creek, which has a very light flow through the property, a beaver pond, which is spring-fed, and rain and snowfall. As Alex told us earlier, Thrive All anticipates approximately 250 residents living in 150 dwellings. We discerned that the lay of the land didn't allow for all dwellings to source water from a single body of water, even if we were to use earthen mounds to create a reservoir with enough shoreline to accommodate these houses. Further, The creation of that large of a reservoir would isolate the northern and southern halves of the property from each other. The next slide shows some calculations where we discovered that average annual rain and snowfall amounts for this region led us to the decision that the most cost-effective and efficient means of providing water will be utilizing rain catchment systems on all buildings and also the strategic placement of communal wells. Water catchment systems have a capacity of 12,000 gallons per year per dwelling. This allows each two-person dwelling to have access to 1,000 gallons of catchment water per month and then be supplemented by water from the drilled wells. The catchment systems for individual dwellings will have 500-gallon tanks and will cost approximately $3,000 each, while the catchment systems for the communal buildings will each have 5,000-gallon tanks and cost approximately $4,000 to $6,000. The drilled wells will be strategically placed to facilitate ease of service to the common buildings, pasture lands, and outdoor grow guilds, and there will be drilled wells within each of the neighborhoods. Each of these drilled wells will have an approximate cost of $25,000. This plan allows us to get into future development without having to utilize Sturtles Creek or the Beaver Pond. These resources will be held in reserve and will allow for a more precise placement of a pond that can be used as a reservoir. This water plan addresses current development and allows flexibility for the future. And now Angela will discuss our energy requirements.
Thanks, Joey. All right, for our Thrive All community, we're going to be focused on primarily off-grid energy. What this means is we're going to use primarily solar, battery packs, and for the emergency here and there, a generator here and there. We are not going to be using any Canadian utilities, and this is something that the client has desired and wanted. Now, when we looked at this, the best picture and the best mixture of energy was really all of these versus things like geothermal, mostly because on our land, we have a bunch of Precambrian shield. You can see on this map, we have 3 different areas. We're going to put in the southwestern corner are 320 solar panels, and those panels are going to be part of the goat farm. And then the rest of them sprinkled throughout those 3 areas to heat, electrify the rest of the community. Speaking of and looking at all of the panels, let's talk numbers. Solar and battery power is a significant upfront cost. Here you'll see all the energy costs and annual kilowatt hours that we've outlined for each of our homes, from cabins to yurts to experiential homes, etc. In total, we have about 12,000 square feet of the community to electrify per year. This will give us about an estimated 614,000 kilowatt hours per year. This means we need about $950,000 for the solar panels and about $2.4 million for the batteries. And this is battery packs to help for about 3 consecutive days without sunlight. And this is all for the entirety of the community. If we go more in depth to the next slide and take a look, this is what a battery and generator backup, an off-grid kind of system looks like. Super important, we've got everything from solar panel to chargers and controllers and service boxes, all pieces that will be part of our community. And next up, we really want to look at what Guy had mentioned earlier in our presentation, which is our community center. This is 7,000 square feet, so it's fairly large. With this particular abode, we will have 624 solar panels here. And again, we'll have battery and generator when needed, when there isn't sunlight. And last but certainly not least is the sauna. Everyone needs a sauna. We're going to be in the winter months. So if you look at what we're going to do for the sauna, we will be using wood from our land. We'll need about 1 to 2 quarts of wood that we'll leverage with the community members. And this is really estimating about 1 sauna session per week with all of our folks. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Justin for waste.
Thank you, Angela. So at Thrive All, nothing will go to waste as we aim to close the loops between our production, consumption, and our waste. So our community will be using composting toilets to keep in accordance with the client's desire to be as off-grid as possible. We'll be using all of the best practices. Let me go back. So we'll have a community composting center located at the Southwest region where residents will contribute to producing healthy living compost for use in the food forests and the greenhouses. Sorry, I think we're off the slides a little bit. We can go back. We can go back to the composting one. Yeah. So let's go to the composting one. Yeah, okay. So we'll have a community composting center located at the Southwest region where residents will contribute to producing healthy living compost for use in food forests and in the greenhouses. We'll be using all of the best practices for composting, especially in this cold winter climate, in order to produce food-safe, pathogen-free compost. So we'll separate the waste from the households where one or more residents uses pharmaceuticals from the other compost, and that way we'll use that for the non-edible plants like the pollinator garden. So in the next slide, we'll see the biogas digester building. So our community will have an indoor above ground biogas digester in zone 3 near the community center. So having the digester indoors and above ground takes care of a lot of the logistical challenges, like the inability to dig deep into the soil because we have that rocky Cambrian shield, and it will protect the digester from the elements. So next slide. So in here, we just want to highlight that for the heating, we'll be using tankless biogas hot water heaters, and this will consume a little bit of the biogas during the winter to keep the biogas at a mesophilic level, and then in the summer to keep it thermophilic, but we will be producing the digestate all year round. So the digester feedstock will be mostly comprised of human manure, kitchen scraps, and goat manure. And next, we'll see that the biogas product will be used mostly by the community center. And if we go to the next slide, so we're going to have a lot of biogas, about 10 cubic meters every single day. And the community center will probably be using about 2 cubic meters. So for all of that biogas surplus, we'll have a system where residents can take their 1 cubic meter biogas bags and they can get them filled up. So they'll be able to fill up 2 to 4 times per month, and each gas bag will last them about 3 to 5 days. So that's just extra gas for cooking. And finally, the digestate will be used for the pollinator garden and for soil regeneration. We'll be producing about 46 gallons of fertilizer per day.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. And we'll wrap up quickly with economics. So here on this slide, we show some of the costs that were incorporated for the capital investment for the Thrive All community. And if you notice in the bottom there, so it's about 5.2 million Canadian dollars. But again, that's split between 150 families. So the shared cost per family was around 34,000. On the right side, you'll see the economics per family. And there's a range for the dwellings is the biggest range there because there's so many different types of dwellings. But this is just a first stab at what the financials will look like. We do believe there's room for optimization. As mentioned before, the freight farms, that cost could be cut back significantly with hydroponics. And the more labor and the more locally bioregionally appropriate materials we use, we believe we'll be able to further optimize this cost as well. And thank you very much for listening to our presentation about the Thrive All community.